The judge struck his gavel decisively, imposing a fine on the defense attorney only to discover moments later that he had inadvertently penalized the Vice President of the United States. The atmosphere within the courtroom was heavy with an unshakable tension, a weight that pressed down on the hearts of those present. The situation had captured the interest of the entire nation. A multi-billion-dollar tech conglomerate, Titan Digital, faced serious allegations of ethical misconduct. Accusations varied from widespread violations of data privacy to stifling competition via unlawful tactics. If deemed guilty, the decision could establish a benchmark that would profoundly impact the corporate landscape. Judge William Adler adjusted his glasses, surveying the crowded courtroom until his gaze landed on the defense table. He had overseen enough high-profile cases to discern when a lawyer was in over their head. Yet the man standing there, a relatively obscure figure, exuded an unsettling level of confidence. With a composed demeanor and a steady gaze, he adjusted his suit jacket, exuding an air of confidence and poise. Linda Pruitt, the prosecutor, presented a different narrative altogether. A highly regarded federal attorney, she earned a reputation for her fierce approach in the courtroom, expertly dismantling defenses with meticulous precision. Today, she resembled a predator that had caught the scent of its next meal. Judge Adler struck his gavel with a decisive tap. "Ms. Pruitt, you are welcome to continue." She ascended gracefully, gliding toward the heart of the room. "Your Honor, the details of this case are irrefutable. Titan Digital deliberately participated in illegal data collection, gathering personal information without permission, and subsequently capitalized on that data by selling it to external entities. Evidence will reveal that they distorted algorithms to eliminate competitors, compelling small businesses to collapse under the burden of an inequitable market. And perhaps the most incriminating evidence, internal memos revealed that they were fully aware of these actions yet opted to proceed for the sake of profit." She pivoted slightly, directing a keen gaze toward the defense table. "And yet the defense is ready to contend that these actions were not merely legal but also ethical? I eagerly await that explanation." Judge Adler regarded the defense attorney, who had not yet taken the opportunity to introduce himself properly in the courtroom. "Counselor, would you like to share your thoughts before we move on to the witness testimony?" The man rose at last, fastening his suit with a measured grace. As he spoke, his voice remained steady and controlled. "Your Honor, I am John Vance, and I aim to demonstrate that the prosecution's case, though persuasive, relies on misinterpretations and a selective presentation of the law." Judge Adler squinted, his gaze sharp and discerning. The man's manner of speaking and his demeanor held a certain intrigue. A calm confidence that set him apart from the usual defense attorneys confronting a federal case. Ms. Pruitt released a quick breath, her head shaking in disbelief. "Your Honor, we are not here to engage in trivialities. The proof is irrefutable. I have expert witnesses ready to provide testimony regarding the direct consequences of Titan Digital's misconduct. Their accounts will validate that these actions were not only unlawful but also detrimental." John Vance inclined his head ever so slightly. "With all due respect, Ms. Pruitt, the intention behind actions is significant. The implementation of the law is significant. No matter how many witnesses you gather, if Titan Digital acted within the law, their actions, however unpalatable, do not classify them as criminals." A wave of whispers cascaded through the courtroom. Judge Adler lifted his hand to bring them to quietude. "This moment calls for substance, Mr. Vance, not theatrics. Adhere to the truth." John nodded quietly, settling back into his seat, yet the atmosphere in the room had subtly transformed. There was an unsettling quality to this man, yet the trial would move forward with the judge observing intently. Linda Pruitt acted swiftly. With a commanding presence, she walked purposefully through the courtroom, gesturing to the bailiff. "Dr. Thomas Baird is summoned to the stand by the prosecution." A gentleman in his mid-50s, dressed in a finely tailored suit and sporting wire-rimmed glasses, ascended with purpose. He possessed extensive expertise in data ethics, having spent years scrutinizing corporate wrongdoing. Upon taking the oath, Pruitt moved ahead with determination. "Dr. Baird, could you explain to the court the activities of Titan Digital regarding the user data?" He cleared his throat, a subtle prelude to the words that were about to follow. Indeed, Titan Digital employed an advanced approach to user profiling. They amassed extensive personal information, including search histories, location tracking, voice recordings, and at times, private messages, all without obtaining clear consent from users. This information was subsequently transformed into a revenue stream, marketed to external advertisers and utilized to enhance the algorithms that dictated users' online experiences. In essence, they skillfully influenced user actions to enhance their profitability. Pruitt gave a slight nod. Just to clarify, was this permissible under the law? Baird paused, weighing his words with precision. That is the discussion at hand. Current U.S. data privacy laws contain gaps and loopholes that enable companies to rationalize these actions. However, from an ethical standpoint, it undermines consumer trust. Linda Pruitt faced the jury, allowing the gravity of those words to linger in the air. She turned back to the defense table. Who can attest to that? John Vance stood up from his chair and walked towards the stand with a deliberate stride, lingering for a moment to create a sense of unease in Dr. Baird. Dr. Baird, you pointed out that Titan Digital's actions took advantage of gaps in the law. Could you clarify which specific laws were violated? Dr. Baird carefully adjusted his glasses. Although no specific law directly criminalizes this, regulations such as the FTC Act do prohibit unfair business practices. John interjected seamlessly. Indeed, it is unjust. However, is it unlawful? Dr. Baird paused, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. The court will determine that matter. John offered a slight nod. Precisely. Isn't it a fact that the majority of prominent tech companies partake in various methods of data collection? Dr. Baird made a subtle adjustment in his position. Indeed, though not everyone employs misleading tactics. John advanced a bit nearer. Did Titan Digital's user agreement contain any provisions regarding data collection? Dr. Baird let out a weary sigh. Indeed, however, there are no additional inquiries. John pivoted and made his way back to his seat, leaving the jury with a lingering question to ponder. If Titan Digital outlined its data practices in their terms of service, could it truly be deemed illegal? Linda Pruitt's jaw clenched. She was aware of his intentions. He wasn't contesting the case on ethical grounds. He was deconstructing it based on technicalities. She faced the judge. Your Honor, the prosecution wishes to summon its next witness, former Titan Digital employee Sarah Levin. A woman in her early 40s approached the stand, her demeanor reflecting a palpable unease. With hands quivering ever so slightly, she settled into her seat after taking the oath. Pruitt eased her tone. Ms. Levin, could you please describe your responsibilities at Titan Digital for the court? I was involved in internal compliance, she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. I was responsible for examining company policies to ensure they were in compliance with legal standards. Did Titan Digital intentionally participate in unethical practices? A moment of silence followed by a deliberate nod. Indeed, I came across correspondence from high-ranking officials deliberating on modifications to policies in order to evade regulatory examination. Entire teams were devoted to exploring limits while remaining within the confines of legality. Pruitt continued to push forward. Did anyone in the company voice any concerns regarding these actions? Sarah paused, her voice softening. I certainly did. So, what was the outcome of your actions? A profound inhalation. I was released from my position. All eyes turned to the front as the atmosphere thickened with anticipation. John Vance, on the other hand, remained completely unresponsive. He casually approached the witness stand, his hands tucked into his pockets. Ms. Levin, he started, his voice steady. There were talks regarding the modification of policies within the organization. Has Titan Digital ever directed its employees to engage in illegal activities? Sarah dismissed the idea with a shake of her head. Not in a straightforward manner? As a compliance officer, have you ever taken the step to formally report these concerns to federal agencies? She paused, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. Absolutely not. John inclined his body ever so slightly. In summary, you deemed their policies to be dubious, yet not unlawful. You failed to report them. So, you're standing up and sharing your experience against your previous employer because you believe you've been treated unfairly? Sarah took a deep breath. It goes beyond my own experience. It concerns the actions taken against countless individuals. John locked eyes with her for a brief moment before retreating. There are no additional inquiries. Judge Adler readjusted his glasses, his face a mask of inscrutability. Yet, there was an aspect of John Vance's approach that began to resonate with a sense of precision. John Vance reclined in his chair, observing as Linda Pruitt summoned her next witness, a cybersecurity analyst who had prepared an extensive report on Titan Digital's algorithms. The prosecution was systematic, illustrating a scenario where a corporation had concealed its dishonesty beneath layers of complex legal language. Yet John remained untroubled. Indeed, he appeared nearly at ease. Judge Adler observed. Mr. Vance, the judge remarked as he adjusted his glasses. Do you have any questions for cross-examination? John stood up, fastening his suit jacket with a careful, unhurried grace. I have a couple of inquiries, Your Honor. He approached the witness stand with a calm assurance that began to create an air of discomfort. "You're examining the algorithms of Titan Digital, right?" he inquired of the analyst. "Wait a moment. Absolutely. So you concluded that they were employed to influence what users encountered on the internet?" "Indeed, the algorithm was crafted to prioritize Titan's offerings while diminishing the visibility of rival options." John nodded, moving back and forth with a thoughtful air. "Would you consider that to be atypical in the tech sector?" The analyst paused, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. "Actually, it's quite common for large corporations to employ algorithms that favor their own offerings. In other words, Titan Digital was following the same path as almost every other major company. They advanced it further." John ceased his restless movement. However, they did not violate any laws. A prolonged stillness ensued. The analyst adjusted their position subtly, not in a manner that has been clearly deemed unlawful. John faced the jury. "Fascinating." He took a moment, allowing the words to linger in the atmosphere. "There are no additional inquiries." Linda Pruitt had already risen to her feet. "Your Honor, the prosecution has presented compelling evidence that Titan Digital intentionally took advantage of legal ambiguities, harming consumers in the process." John inclined his head ever so slightly. "Shades of ambiguity." He allowed the phrase to linger in the atmosphere before shifting his gaze to the judge. "Your Honor, if the law does not clearly forbid a certain action, is it possible for a defendant to be deemed guilty of violating it?" Judge Adler arched an eyebrow. "You're treading a fine line with your focus on semantics, Mr. Vance." John offered a faint smile. "Indeed, the nuances of language hold significant weight in legal proceedings, wouldn't you agree?" Linda Pruitt let out a sharp breath. "Your Honor, this is a distraction." "Could it be?" John faced the jury. Titan Digital might have acted in ways that lack integrity, yet lacking integrity does not equate to breaking the law. If the prosecution is unable to identify a specific law that has been clearly violated, then what is the purpose of this proceeding? A wave of whispers swept across the courtroom. Judge Adler struck his gavel with authority. "That's sufficient. The jury will overlook any efforts to obscure the distinctions between right and wrong and what is lawful." John beamed with delight. "Certainly, Your Honor." Yet, the harm had already been inflicted. He had sown the seed. Pruitt's irritation was unmistakable. She was aware of his intentions. He wasn't attempting to demonstrate that Titan Digital was blameless. He was demonstrating that the law alone was inadequate to secure their conviction. And even more troubling, he was achieving his goals. Yet, time remained. The prosecution had another strategy to employ. Linda Pruitt inhaled deeply, her fingers tightly clutching the edge of the prosecution table. She had encountered smooth-talking defense attorneys in the past, but John Vance was on an entirely different level. He chose not to engage in a dispute. He changed direction. He acknowledged his missteps. He pondered if the law possessed the power to impose punishment for it. She refused to allow him to dictate the story. The prosecution summoned CEO Robert Landry to testify. A distinguished figure, tall and silver-haired, clad in an elegant suit, advanced with purpose. Landry represented Titan Digital. Serene and refined, yet bearing the cautious gaze of one who has navigated the shadows of observation for far too long. Upon taking office, Pruitt immediately got to work. "Mr. Landry, Titan Digital faces allegations of misusing user data, placing financial gain above ethical considerations, and intentionally stifling competition. Do you refute any of these claims?" Landry brought his hands together in front of him. "Titan Digital has consistently adhered to legal standards." Pruitt offered a constrained smile. "That's not what I requested." He let out a long, deliberate breath. "I acknowledge that our business model emphasizes growth and profitability. Such is the essence of a fiercely contested field." Pruitt nodded as though he had anticipated the response. "How often did your internal teams raise concerns about the ethical implications of your practices?" Landry made a subtle movement. "I can't provide a specific figure." "So, on multiple occasions?" "Absolutely." "And still, you pressed on." Landry's jaw tightened. "We adhere to the regulations." Pruitt faced the jury. "Esteemed audience, behold the moment. Not an outright rejection. That won't suffice as a justification. It's important to emphasize that, from a technical standpoint, no laws were violated." She glanced over her shoulder at Landry. "Do you think Titan Digital took precautions to steer clear of legal boundaries?" "Indeed. Would you agree that Titan Digital intentionally worked to remain within those boundaries? Would it still be acceptable if it involved taking advantage of loopholes?" Landry paused for a fleeting instant. "Indeed." Pruitt took a moment to reflect. "There are no additional inquiries." She pivoted and made her way back to her table, fighting the temptation to steal a look at John Vance. She had offered him a chance, yet it was fraught with peril. If he proceeded with caution, delving deeper into this argument could uncover more than he had planned. John adjusted his suit jacket with careful precision as he made his way toward the witness stand. His tone was relaxed and friendly. "Mr. Landry, you stated that Titan Digital adhered to the law, is that right?" "Absolutely. Would you agree that the law serves to offer businesses clear directives on what is allowed and what is not?" "Absolutely. Therefore, if Titan Digital adhered to those guidelines, who can be held accountable if the law lacked sufficient rigor?" Linda Pruitt sprang to her feet. "Disagreement. Persuasive." Judge Adler raised a hand. "Enduring." "Mr. Vance, could you please reword your question?" John nodded, unperturbed. "Mr. Landry, was there any prior notification from a federal agency to Titan Digital regarding potential legal violations before this case arose?" "Negative." "Have any fines or cease and desist orders been issued by the Federal Trade Commission, the Department of Justice, or any other regulatory body?" "Negative." John faced the jury. "Fascinating." Pruitt was already back on her feet. "Disagreement. The defense is attempting to imply that legality and morality are synonymous." John gave a slight shrug. "Isn't that precisely what the prosecution is undertaking? This entire trial has been a concerted effort to persuade you that Titan Digital is culpable of some wrongdoing. But what exactly is the guilt here?" He allowed the question to linger for a moment before proceeding. "They desire to provoke your anger. They expect you to penalize Titan Digital for adhering to the guidelines solely because they disapprove of those guidelines." Judge Adler let out a weary sigh. "Mr. Vance, you are approaching the point of delivering a lecture to the jury." John offered a subtle nod. "Comprehended, Your Honor." However, he had already fulfilled his obligations, Your Honor. The jury had shifted their focus away from Titan Digital.